Vanessa appeared in my living room, made herself comfortable on the sofa, and, right in front of my entire family, began hurling insults at me, accusing me of stealing her money. But I, calmly, asked just one question, a question after which Vanessa turned pale and nearly fainted. But to understand how we got to that moment, I need to take you back a few hours. The Sunday afternoon had started with that golden light filtering through the curtains, turning everything into something deceptively peaceful. I was in the kitchen, preparing the family dinner I hosted every 2 weeks, but my hands were shaking. It was not the tremor of age. It was fear, because I knew something was going to explode that night. I had spent weeks feeling the tension growing, like a pressure cooker about to burst, and the detonator had a name. Vanessa, the wife of my son, Jason. For 6 months I had endured her snubs, her poisoned comments, her looks full of barely disguised hatred. But that night, something in the air told me she was not going to hold back anymore. I looked at the wall clock, that old wooden clock that belonged to my mother, 5:30 in the afternoon. In minutes, my family would start arriving. I had prepared everything with obsessive care. The pot roast bubbled on the stove, the fresh dinner rolls rested on the table, the cream-colored tablecloth covered the dining table, and the silverware shone without a spot. Everything was perfect, as always, as it had to be, because Vanessa looked for mistakes like a bloodhound looks for a scent, and when she found them, she attacked. I heard the first car pull into the driveway. I walked to the window and saw my sister Susan getting out of her car, accompanied by our cousin Nancy. Susan was wearing her favorite mustard-colored sweater, and Nancy brought a bottle of wine. The two were chatting animatedly, oblivious to the storm that was approaching. I opened the door before they rang the doorbell. Susan looked me straight in the eyes, and her smile froze. She has known me since I was born. She knows how to read every wrinkle on my face, every tension in my shoulders. She walked in slowly, touched my arm, and whispered, "What is wrong, Margaret?" I did not answer, because if I said it out loud, if I confessed the fear that was eating me up inside, I would crumble ahead of time, and I could not afford that, not yet. Nancy went straight to the kitchen with the wine. Susan stayed with me in the living room, watching me with that mix of concern and alertness that only a sister can have. Then I heard the second car, the silver one. My stomach twisted, as if someone had squeezed it with a fist. I looked out the window, and there it was, Jason's car parking right behind Susan's. My son got out first, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing that sand-colored shirt that made him look just like his father. Always tired lately, always with that shadow of exhaustion in his eyes. From the passenger side, she stepped out. Vanessa, olive green dress, tight like a second skin, sky-high heels that resonated against the pavement with every step. Her dark hair fell in perfect waves, her makeup flawless, her posture erect and full of that arrogance she confused with elegance. She did not look toward my house. She did not even turn her head. She walked like a queen doing a favor with her presence, as if stepping into my home were beneath her. And in that moment, I knew. I knew it with every fiber of my being. That night, Vanessa was not coming to have dinner. She was coming to destroy me. Jason rang the doorbell. I took a deep breath, took off my apron with trembling hands, and walked toward the door. When I opened it, my son hugged me with that genuine affection that always comforted me, that hug that reminded me of the boy who used to run into my arms after school. "Hello, Mom," he said with a tired smile. Vanessa entered behind him without even looking at me. She passed by me as if I were invisible, as if I were an old piece of furniture that no longer had value. There was no greeting. There was no fake smile. Nothing. Just that silent contempt that went through me like a knife. She headed directly to the living room and dropped onto the main sofa, that gray sofa that had belonged to my husband. She settled in as if it were her house, as if I were the guest. She crossed her legs, took out her phone, and began checking messages, completely ignoring Susan and Nancy, who greeted her politely. Jason looked at me with that apologetic expression I knew too well. "She had a rough day," he whispered, as if that justified everything. There was always an excuse. Always. I went back to the kitchen trying to control the shaking in my legs. Nancy was pouring wine into the glasses. She offered me one, and I took it, even though I almost never drink. That night I needed something to give me even an illusion of courage. "Everything looks delicious, Margaret," Nancy said with her usual sweetness, but I could barely respond, because from the living room I could feel Vanessa's presence like a toxic shadow spreading through the house. I could feel the air becoming heavier, denser, more unbreathable. Susan entered the kitchen and closed the door halfway. She stared at me. "What is really going on?" she asked in a low voice, and I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to tell her about the 6 months of silent humiliations, about the venomous comments Vanessa threw at me when Jason was not listening, about how she made me feel small, insignificant, useless in my own home. I wanted to tell her about that time I found her rummaging through the drawers in my bedroom, looking for something she never explained. About the day I heard her on the phone, saying that I was a nosy old woman, that I did not know when to disappear, but the words got stuck in my throat, because something told me that tonight, very soon, I would no longer need to tell anyone anything. "Everything is fine, Susan," I lied, forcing a smile that convinced no one. "Just hostess nerves." My sister did not believe me, but she did not insist either. She knew me well enough to know that when I decided to keep silent, it was because I had my reasons. She nodded slowly and returned to the living room with Nancy, leaving me alone in the kitchen with my thoughts and my fear. I served the pot roast on the large porcelain platter, the one I use only for special occasions. My hands were shaking so much that I almost spilled a little on the table. "Breathe deep. Calm down, Margaret," I told myself. Calm down. But I was not calm, and something told me I would never be again. I called everyone to come to the dining room. Susan and Nancy came immediately, praising the aroma coming from the kitchen. Jason also stood up, but Vanessa remained seated on the sofa, eyes glued to her phone. "Are you coming, honey?" Jason asked her with that soft voice he reserved only for her. Vanessa looked up slowly, as if she had been interrupted doing something extremely important. In a moment, she responded coldly. "I am finishing something." Jason smiled uncomfortably and sat at the table. I began to serve the plates, trying to ignore the empty space where my daughter-in-law should be. Nancy and Susan exchanged looks that said more than 1,000 words. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The roast was starting to get cold. No one started eating. We all waited politely, as if it were normal for one person to make the whole family wait because she was checking her phone. Finally, Vanessa stood up. She did not walk toward the dining room. She walked toward the kitchen, opened the refrigerator without asking for permission, and took out a bottle of water. She opened it, took a sip, and only then deigned to sit at the table. She did not apologize. She gave no explanations. She sat down, looked at her plate, and her expression changed. It was subtle, but I saw it. That grimace of barely contained disgust, as if I had served her poison instead of food. "Stew again." She said it with a tone that pretended to be casual but distilled contempt. "Always the same." "No, Margaret." Silence fell over the table like a concrete slab. Jason tensed up but said nothing. Nancy looked at her plate uncomfortably. Susan watched me intently, waiting for my response. "I thought you liked it," I replied with the calmest voice I could muster. "Last time you had second helpings." Vanessa let out a short laugh, without humor. "Oh, yes. How polite I am, right? Having seconds even though the food is barely edible." Jason put his fork down on the table with more force than necessary. "Vanessa." "What?" She cut him off, turning toward him with defiant eyes. "Can I not have an opinion now? Do I have to pretend everything is delicious when clearly your mother is losing her touch?" I felt something break inside my chest, but I did not respond. I pressed my lips together and lowered my gaze. Nancy reached her hand under the table and squeezed mine, giving me silent strength. "The food is excellent," Susan said firmly, looking directly at Vanessa. "As always." Vanessa returned her gaze with a cold smile. "Of course you would say that. You people always protect each other, right? The perfect family." She began to eat, but every bite seemed like a deliberate effort to demonstrate her disgust. She chewed slowly, making small grimaces, sighing as if she were swallowing something horrible. No one else was eating normally. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "And this tablecloth," Vanessa continued after an unbearable silence, touching the fabric with 2 fingers as if it were something contaminated. It is the same one as always, isn't it? How old is it? 30 years? 40? 20? I replied in a low voice. Susan gave it to me. It shows, said Vanessa with a cruel smile. It is already worn out. The stains do not even come out completely anymore. Look here. She pointed to a spot that, effectively, had a very faint mark that I had tried to remove 1,000 times. It is a tablecloth with history, Nancy intervened, trying to smooth things over. It has sentimental value. Sentimental value, repeated Vanessa with mockery. That is the excuse people use when they do not want to spend money on new things. Jason closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. Vanessa, please. Please what? She confronted him. Please pretend that this house does not look like a museum? Please pretend that not everything here is old and outdated? She looked around with exaggerated disdain. Look at these curtains. Look at that furniture. Everything is from another era, Jason. Your mother lives as if we were still in 1990. This is my home, I said finally, looking up to meet her eyes. And every single thing here has its history and its reason for being. Your home, repeated Vanessa with a dry laugh. Yes, your home, where you drag Jason every 2 weeks to make yourself feel important, so you do not feel alone, so you do not face the fact that no one needs you anymore. Every word was a stab. Jason stood up abruptly. That is enough, Vanessa. But she stood up too, confronting him. That is enough? Just now you dare to say something? We have been coming to these horrible dinners for 6 months, and you never said anything. You never defended me when your mother looked at me with that face of superiority, as if I were not enough for you. I have never looked at you like that. I finally exploded, also standing up. My legs were shaking, but my voice came out stronger than I expected. I have never treated you badly. I have always welcomed you with respect. Respect? Vanessa spat. Do you call it respect to watch every move I make? To judge me in silence? To try to control your son through these stupid family dinners? Susan stood up, placing herself between us. Vanessa, I think you are exaggerating. No one here has disrespected you. You have. Vanessa looked at her with fury. Of course. The loyal sister. All of you are the same. Bitter old women who cannot stand to see a young woman shine. Nancy stifled a cry. Jason ran both hands through his hair, completely overwhelmed by the situation. And me. I could only look at that woman who had entered my family and was destroying it from the inside. That woman who was now walking back to the living room with furious steps, as if she was not finished. Because she was not finished, this was just beginning. Vanessa dropped onto the living room sofa again with such force that the furniture creaked. She crossed her arms over her chest and fixed her gaze on the wall, as if all of us were invisible. Her breathing was agitated, her jaw clenched. She was furious. But there was something else, something calculated in her posture. Jason followed her like a wounded dog. Honey, please, let us go back to the table. Let us finish dinner and— I am not hungry. She cut him off without even looking at him. That food is inedible. I stood by the dining room entrance, with my hands pressed against my stomach, trying to control the trembling that ran through my entire body. Susan approached me and whispered, We should leave. This is not right. But I shook my head. Something told me that if I gave up now, if I let Vanessa win this battle, I would never have a voice in my own house again. I would never have dignity in front of my son again. No, I said in a low but firm voice. Stay. Nancy cleared some plates from the table with shaking hands, trying to do something useful in the middle of the chaos. The sound of porcelain clinking softly was the only noise in that house that had suddenly become a tomb. Vanessa took out her phone again and began typing furiously. Her long, perfectly painted nails hit the screen with violence. Jason sat in the armchair across from her, with his elbows resting on his knees and his head in his hands. Do you know what is the worst part of all this? Vanessa said suddenly, without looking up from her phone. Her voice had changed. It was no longer just anger, it was pure poison. The worst part is that your mother thinks she is a saint. She thinks she is the perfect woman, the understanding mother-in-law, the generous hostess. She looked up and looked directly at me. Her eyes were 2 dark wells full of hate. But I know the truth, Margaret. I know what you really are. My heart began to beat so hard, I felt everyone could hear it. I do not know what you are talking about. Do you not? Vanessa leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. You do not know what I am talking about? How convenient! She stood up slowly, like a predator stalking its prey. She walked toward me with measured, deliberate steps. Susan instinctively placed herself by my side, but Vanessa ignored her completely. 3 months ago, she began with a dangerously calm voice. I entrusted you with something important. I asked you for a favor because I thought, naively, that I could trust my husband's mother. She stopped less than 3 feet from me. I could smell her expensive perfume, see every detail of her flawless makeup, feel the heat of her fury. I asked you to hold something for me, something valuable, something I needed to keep safe for a while. My mind began to work frantically, trying to remember. 3 months ago? I did not remember any favor, any request. What was she talking about? Vanessa? I do not remember. Of course you do not remember. She exploded, and her scream made Nancy drop a fork that bounced against the floor with a metallic noise. Because to you it meant nothing. Because you took it as if it were yours. Jason stood up, alarmed. What are you talking about? Vanessa turned toward him with shining eyes. I do not know if it was from tears or pure rage. I gave your mother $15,000 to keep for me. $15,000. Jason, money I had saved for years for our new house, for our future. The world stopped. $15,000. I had never seen that amount of money together in my life, much less received something like that to keep. That is a lie, I said with a trembling but clear voice. I never received any money from you. A lie? Vanessa let out a hysterical laugh. A lie? You came to ask me for it. You told me you needed it for some expenses, that you would pay me back in a month. And I, like an idiot, believed you. The words made no sense. Nothing she said made sense. I had never asked anyone for money, much less her. I lived on my modest but sufficient pension. I had never needed to borrow. Jason. I turned toward my son, looking for some sanity in his eyes. Son, I never. But Jason was looking at Vanessa with a mixture of confusion and horror. $15,000? Where did you get $15,000? And that was when I saw the first flash of panic in Vanessa's eyes. It was barely a second, a fraction of a moment where her perfect mask cracked. They are my savings, she said quickly. From my job, from my bonuses, from… You do not get bonuses, Jason interrupted her, standing up slowly. And your salary barely covers our monthly expenses. You have always said that. The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I had saved. For years. You did not know because I wanted to give you a surprise. But her voice no longer sounded convincing. It sounded desperate. And you gave it to my mother to hold for you, Jason repeated slowly, as if he were processing every word, without telling me anything. $15,000. Yes. And she stole it from me. Vanessa pointed an accusing finger at me, recovering her fury. That is why I come to this damn house every 2 weeks. To watch her. To see if I find any sign of where she hid my money. Susan let out a sound of disbelief. This is ridiculous. Margaret would never. Shut up, Vanessa yelled at her. You do not know anything. None of you know anything. She turned toward me again, eyes wide. Give me back my money. Margaret, now. Or I swear to God I am going to. You are going to what? I asked. And for the first time all night, my voice came out completely steady, without fear, without trembling, because in that moment, as I watched her crumble in front of me, something clicked in my memory. 3 months ago, a random afternoon, Vanessa had come to my house alone, something she never did. She had been strangely nice, almost sweet. She had helped me organize some kitchen drawers. And her purse, her large brown leather purse, had been left open on the table. When she went to the bathroom, something had fallen out of that purse, a folded paper. I had picked it up to give it back to her. But before folding it again, my eyes had caught some words printed on the header. Wells Fargo, savings account. Account holder name, Vanessa Miller. Her maiden name, an account Jason did not know about. And now, while she screamed at me about stolen money, about $15,000 that supposedly I had taken from her. The pieces began to fit together like a macabre puzzle. She had never given me any money. She had moved that money from that secret account. And now she needed an explanation for its disappearance. She needed a culprit, and that culprit was going to be me. The living room had become an invisible boxing ring. Vanessa was breathing heavily, hands clenched into fists at her sides. I remained still, processing the revelation that had just hit me like lightning in the middle of a storm. That bank account, that paper that had fallen from her purse 3 months ago, it had not been an accident. It had been a sign, a warning from the universe that I had not known how to interpret in time. "I am waiting," Vanessa said with a cutting voice, crossing her arms. "Give me back my money or I call the police right now. I report you for theft. Margaret. And at your age, with your health problems, I do not think jail is a very comfortable place." Nancy stifled a scream. Susan took a step forward, furious. "How dare you threaten my sister? She has never stolen anything in her life. I do not need you to believe me." Vanessa took out her phone and began to dial. "Let the police investigate. Surely they find the money hidden in some of those old and decrepit pieces of furniture." Jason finally reacted. He stepped between his wife and me, hands outstretched as if trying to stop a moving train. "Stop. Stop right now, Vanessa. This has gotten completely out of control." "What got out of control?" she confronted him. "That your mother is a thief? That she stole $15,000 from us? That is what got out of control. That you are lying?" Jason exploded, and his voice rumbled in the walls with a force I had never heard before. "You are lying, and I do not understand why." Vanessa paled slightly, but recovered her composure almost immediately. "How dare you? Are you calling me a liar? You are going to believe her instead of your own wife?" "I do not know who to believe," Jason admitted, running both hands through his hair with desperation. "But none of this makes sense, Vanessa. Nothing. Why would my mother want to steal money? Why would you keep $15,000 with her instead of in the bank? Why did you never tell me you had that amount saved?" Every question was a direct thrust to the heart of Vanessa's narrative, and I could see her start to wobble. "Why? Because I do not trust banks," she responded quickly. "Because I wanted it to be in a safe place. Because I thought I could trust my husband's mother. Banks are literally the safest place to keep money," Susan said with a voice loaded with skepticism. "That excuse makes absolutely no sense." Vanessa glared at her. "I did not ask for your opinion, but you are going to hear it anyway," Susan continued, crossing her arms. "Because what you are doing here is not seeking justice. It is humiliating my sister. It is destroying her in front of her own family. And I am not going to allow it." "You are not going to allow it?" Vanessa let out a hysterical laugh. "And what are you going to do? Protect the thief? Cover for her?" "Enough," I shouted finally, surprising myself. My voice came out with a strength I did not know I had stored. "Enough already, Vanessa." Everyone turned toward me. The silence fell like a heavy cloak. My knees were shaking, but I stood firm. I took a deep breath, trying to control the whirlwind of emotions that threatened to drown me. "Never," I began with a clear and strong voice. "Never in my life have I asked you for money. You have never given me money to hold. I have never entered your house without permission. I have never touched anything that does not belong to me." Vanessa opened her mouth to interrupt me, but I raised a hand and, surprisingly, she stayed quiet. "I know I am not perfect," I continued. "I know my house is old. I know my furniture is worn. I know my clothes are not designer, and my food is not gourmet. But I have something that you will never have." I took a step toward her, holding her gaze. "I have dignity and honesty, and a family that knows me well enough to know that I would never steal a penny from anyone." "Pretty words," Vanessa spat, but her voice had lost strength. "They do not change the fact that my money disappeared. Your money," I repeated slowly. "Your money that you supposedly gave me to hold 3 months ago." "Exactly. 3 months," I said again, this time looking at Jason. 3 months ago. End of August." Jason furrowed his brow, confused by the change in direction of the conversation. "Yes, and the end of August was when you came to my house alone. Right, Vanessa?" I said, turning my attention back to her. "That afternoon you said you wanted to spend time with me, that you wanted to get to know me better. I saw how her eyes tensed slightly. Just a flash, but it was there. You helped me organize the kitchen, I continued. You were very kind, very attentive, so different from how you had been the previous months. Where do you want to get with this? She asked, with a tense voice. To that day, I said slowly, feeling the pieces finally fitting all together. Your purse was left open on my table, and when you went to the bathroom, something fell out of it. Vanessa went rigid like a statue. Her face, previously red with fury, began to lose color. A paper, I continued. A folded paper that I picked up to give back to you, but my eyes saw something before folding it again. Jason was staring at me, trying to understand. Susan and Nancy held their breath. I saw a header, from a bank, with your name. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wall clock seemed to stop ticking. Your maiden name? I added with a soft but deadly voice. Vanessa Miller. An account from Wells Fargo. From the branch on Main Street, Vanessa had lost all the color from her face. Her lips trembled, but no words came out of them. What is she talking about? Jason asked, turning toward his wife. What account? What is this? I do not. Vanessa began to stammer. That has nothing to do with. Do you have a bank account that I do not know about? Jason insisted, and his voice was becoming dangerously low. An account in your maiden name. It is an old account, Vanessa said quickly. From before we got married. I never closed it. It does not matter. If it does not matter, why did you never mention it to me? Jason's voice was loaded with pain and mistrust. We have been married for 5 years, Vanessa. 5 years. And never, not a single time, did you mention that you had a separate bank account. Because I forgot it existed. Vanessa tried to defend, but her voice sounded hollow, desperate. You forgot, I repeated. And this time, my voice had a steel edge I had never used before. That there existed an account where you kept money. Money that Jason did not know you had. I moved a step closer. Vanessa stepped back instinctively. Money that you now say you gave me to hold. Money that supposedly I stole from you. Another step. But you never gave me anything, right, Vanessa? She shook her head, but no words came from her mouth. The money disappeared from that secret account. And you needed an explanation. You needed to justify to Jason why that money was no longer there. Why $15,000 had vanished. Tears began to roll down Vanessa's cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure panic. So you invented this story, I finished. You accused me of theft in front of my family to cover up what you really did with that money. Jason looked at his wife as if she were a stranger, as if he had never truly seen her before. Vanessa, he said with a broken voice, tell me it is not true. Tell me my mother is wrong. But Vanessa could not speak. She could only cry and tremble, trapped in her own web of lies. Vanessa was shaking. Her whole body shook, as if an electric current were passing through her. Tears ran down her face, dragging the expensive mascara she always wore, leaving black streaks over her perfectly made-up cheeks. She opened her mouth several times, trying to articulate words, but only broken, incoherent sounds came out. Jason took a step back, moving away from her as if her proximity burned. His expression was a devastating mixture of betrayal, confusion, and pain. His hands shook at his sides. 5 years, he whispered, more to himself than to any of us. 5 years married and I do not know who you are. Jason, please. Vanessa extended a hand toward him, but my son took another step back. That seemed to break something inside her. Please, listen to me. Let me explain. Explain what? Jason's voice came out broken, almost unrecognizable. Explain that you have a secret bank account? Explain that you lied to me? Explain that you accused my mother of theft to cover your own lies? It is not what you think, Vanessa screamed, and her voice was pure desperation. The account is real. The money was real, but she turned toward me with wild eyes, looking for something, anything that could save her from the abyss opening under her feet. You saw it, she accused me with a trembling finger. You saw the bank statement. Admit it. You saw it, and that is why you knew where I had the money kept. That is why you could steal it from me. It was impressive. Even on the verge of total collapse, she kept trying to build her lie, kept trying to turn me into the villain of her twisted story. But I was no longer afraid. "Yes," I said with absolute calm. "I saw the bank statement. By accident, when it fell from your purse." Vanessa opened her eyes with something resembling hope, as if my admission were a rope that would save her from drowning. "Do you see?" she told Jason quickly. "Do you see? She admits it. She knew about the account. She knew where the money was. She knew an account existed." I corrected her with a firm voice. "I saw your name. I saw the name of the bank. I saw it was a savings account." I made a deliberate pause, letting the silence spread like a spider web. "But I never saw how much money you had in there. I never saw transactions. I never saw anything more than the header before folding the paper back up and leaving it on the table for you to pick up." The hope in Vanessa's eyes began to fade. "And what is more important," I continued, feeling how every word was a nail in the coffin of her lies, "I never touched that money, because you never gave it to me. Because that account is yours, secret, hidden from your husband." "That proves nothing," Vanessa tried weakly. "You still could have." "Could have what?" I interrupted her. "Hacked your bank account? Gone to the bank to withdraw money from an account that is not in my name? With what ID, Vanessa? With what authorization?" She had no answer. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Susan, who had remained silent watching the whole exchange, spoke with a voice loaded with contempt. "This is pathetic. You came here to humiliate my sister, to destroy her in front of her family, basing it on a lie so transparent a child could see it." "It is not a lie," insisted Vanessa. But her voice no longer had conviction. It sounded hollow, desperate, lost. Nancy, who had remained practically paralyzed during the entire exchange, finally found her voice. "Where is the money really, Vanessa?" It was the right question. The question we were all thinking, but no one had dared to ask directly. Vanessa turned toward Nancy with wide eyes. "What?" "The money," Nancy repeated softly but firmly. $15,000 does not just disappear. If Margaret does not have it, and we know she does not have it, then where is it?" I didn't. Vanessa began to back away, as if she could physically distance herself from the question. "Did you spend it?" asked Jason with a dead voice. "Is that it? Did you spend $15,000 without telling me anything, and now you need to blame someone?" "No," screamed Vanessa. "I did not spend anything. The money was there. It was saved, and now it is not." "Saved where?" pressed Jason, taking a step toward her. "Saved with my mother, like you say, or saved in your secret bank account." Vanessa brought her hands to her head, pulling at her perfectly styled hair. She was losing control completely. It was saved. It was safe. And someone took it. "Who?" demanded Jason. "If it was not my mother, who?" And then I saw something in Vanessa's eyes. A flash of something more than panic, something more than desperation. It was guilt, pure and devastating guilt. And suddenly, I knew. I knew it with every fiber of my being. The money had not been stolen. The money had been used for something she did not want Jason to know about. I approached her slowly. Vanessa watched me like a cornered animal watches a hunter. There was terror in her eyes, but also resignation, as if she knew that what was coming was inevitable. I stopped in front of her, so close I could see every detail of her destroyed face, the tears, the runny mascara, the trembling of her lips. And then, with a soft but lethal voice, I asked the question, the only question that mattered, the question that would change everything. "Vanessa," I said slowly, letting every word fall like a stone into a silent lake, "that money you say you stored in my house 3 months ago, was it the same money you took out of your secret Wells Fargo account? From that account at the Main Street branch that you opened with your maiden name? That account Jason does not know exists." I paused, watching the color leave her face completely. "Because if you gave it to me to hold, like you say," I continued with a voice increasingly firm, "then why did you need to hide it from your own husband? Why not leave it in the bank, where it would be safe? Why bring it to my house?" Vanessa opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "Or perhaps," and here my voice became pure steel, "you never gave me that money? You took it out of your secret account and used it for something you cannot tell Jason? And now that he possibly discovered or is about to discover that account, you need to justify why the money is no longer there? The silence that followed was absolute. Vanessa looked at me with eyes so wide they seemed about to pop out of their sockets. Her mouth trembled uncontrollably. Her hands clung to her own clothes, as if that could keep her standing. "What did you do with the money, Vanessa?" asked Jason, and his voice was barely a ghostly whisper. "What did you do?" Vanessa began to shake her head, over and over, as if she could erase reality with that simple gesture. "No, no, this is not happening." "Answer," demanded Jason, and for the first time all night there was true hardness in his voice. "What did you do with our money?" "It is not our money," Vanessa finally exploded. "It was my money. Mine. I earned it. I saved it. I had the right to use it however I wanted. And there it was, the confession. Not in the exact words, but in the feeling behind them. The money had been used, by her, for something she considered hers alone. And this whole scene, all this humiliation she had put me through, had been a smoke screen, a desperate spectacle to divert attention from her own guilt. Jason dropped into the armchair as if his legs could no longer hold him. He had his hands over his face, and his shoulders shook. Vanessa looked at him with horror, finally understanding the magnitude of what she had done, what she had destroyed. Vanessa began to back away, step by step, as if physically moving away from us could erase what she had just confessed. Her heels clicked against the wooden floor with a hollow sound that seemed to mark every second of her collapse. Jason whispered with a broken voice, extending his hands toward him like a desperate plea. "Jason, please, let me explain." But my son did not look up. He remained seated in the armchair with his head in his hands, shoulders tense, breathing agitated. It was as if he were processing not just the lie, but the complete betrayal it represented. "Explain what?" he finally asked without looking at her. His voice sounded distant, as if coming from very far away. "Explain that you have a secret bank account? Explain that you had $15,000 hidden from me? Explain that you accused my mother of theft to cover your own lies?" "It wasn't like that," Vanessa screamed, and her voice broke into a sob. "It wasn't like that. You don't understand. Then make me understand." Jason raised his head slowly, and when his eyes met hers, I saw something that broke my heart. I saw pure pain, deep betrayal, love dying in real time. "Make me understand how we got to this point. Make me understand how my wife could stand in my mother's house and accuse her of being a thief, when it was all a lie. I thought," Vanessa brought her hands to her mouth, trying to contain the sobs, "I thought if I told you the truth, you would leave me. I thought you would hate me. And this is better." Jason's voice rose in volume for the first time. "Destroying my mother is better? Lying to me is better? Having financial secrets is better? I just wanted to have something of my own," Vanessa exploded. "Something that was just mine, without anyone questioning me, without anyone telling me how to spend it." The words hung in the air like sharp daggers. Susan let out a sound of disbelief. "So you admit you spent the money? That it wasn't stolen?" Vanessa spun toward her with burning eyes. "I didn't ask for your opinion, but you are going to hear it anyway," Susan replied with deadly calm, "because what you did here tonight has no name. You humiliated my sister. You accused her of a crime she didn't commit. You made her doubt herself. And all for your own cowardice. You don't know anything about my life," Vanessa yelled at her. "Nothing of what I've had to endure, nothing of what I've had to sacrifice." "Sacrifice?" Nancy repeated with a soft voice full of astonishment. "What exactly have you had to sacrifice, Vanessa? You have a husband who loves you, a family that welcomed you, a roof over your head. A family that judges me," Vanessa interrupted her. "A mother-in-law who looks at me as if I were never enough. A husband who is always on his mother's side." "That is a lie," I finally shouted, feeling indignation boil inside me. "I never judged you. I never made you feel less. I always treated you with respect." "Respect?" Vanessa laughed bitterly. "Do you call those looks respect? Those passive-aggressive comments? Making me feel like I am never enough for your precious son? I never did any of that." My hands were shaking from pure frustration. "It is all in your head. You created an enemy that never existed to justify your own behavior." Jason stood up slowly. He walked toward Vanessa with measured, deliberate steps. When he was in front of her, He looked her directly in the eyes. "What did you spend the money on?" he asked with a dangerously low voice. Vanessa shook her head, backing away. "It doesn't matter." "It matters," Jason insisted. "It matters a lot. Because if I am going to forgive something, I need to know exactly what I am forgiving. If I can forgive it, Jason, please." Tears ran freely down Vanessa's face now. "Don't make me say it. Say it," he ordered. "Tell me what you spent $15,000 on, without me knowing. Tell me what you needed a secret bank account for. Tell me why you lied to me for years." Vanessa covered her face with her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Her entire body shook. She seemed to be crumbling from the inside out. I had debts," she finally confessed between sobs. "Debts from before we got married. Credit cards. Personal loans. Things I hid from you because I was afraid you wouldn't want to marry me if you knew." Jason took a step back, as if he had been hit. "What?" "They were mistakes of youth," Vanessa defended herself desperately. "Stupid purchases, trips, clothes, things I couldn't afford but wanted to have. And when I met you, it was already too late." "The debt was huge." "How much?" asked Jason with a trembling voice. Vanessa didn't answer. She just cried. "How much, Vanessa?" $30,000, she finally whispered. "When we got married, I owed $30,000. The silence that followed was deafening. Nancy brought a hand to her mouth. Susan shook her head slowly, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. $30,000, Jason repeated as if the words were from a foreign language. "And you never thought to tell me? In these 5 years of marriage, you never thought I deserved to know?" "I was afraid," sobbed Vanessa. "Afraid you would judge me. Afraid you would leave me. So I opened that account with my maiden name and started depositing every cent I could save there. Every bonus, every cash gift, everything I got without you knowing. And even so it wasn't enough," I said, beginning to understand the complete picture. $30,000 of debt, and you had only saved $15,000. Vanessa nodded miserably. "The interest kept growing. The banks were calling me, threatening me. I needed to pay, or they were going to garnish my things. They were going to contact you to claim spousal debt. That is why you took out the money," Jason concluded with a dead voice. "That is why the $15,000 disappeared from your account. I used them to pay part of the debt," Vanessa admitted between sobs, "to keep the creditors quiet for a while longer, to buy time while I thought of how to get the rest without you finding out." "And the accusation against my mother?" I asked, feeling the final piece of the puzzle snap into place. "That was also part of your plan." Vanessa looked at me with red and swollen eyes. I thought that if I accused you, if I made enough of a scandal, Jason would distance himself from you. He would distance himself from this house, and then I could convince him to move far away, to another city, where the creditors wouldn't find me, where we could start over." The cold and calculated malice behind her plan left me breathless. "You were going to destroy my relationship with my son," I said slowly, "to escape your own consequences. You were going to make him believe his mother was a thief, that she was a bad person, all so he would blindly follow you wherever you wanted. I didn't know what else to do," Vanessa screamed desperately. "I am drowning in debt. The calls don't stop. The threats don't stop. I needed a way out, and sacrificing me was your way out." My voice came out loaded with pain and disappointment. "Destroying a 68-year-old woman was your solution." Vanessa had no answer. She could only cry and tremble, trapped in the consequences of her own decisions. Jason walked to the window, turning his back to everyone. His shoulders moved with every heavy breath. When he finally spoke, his voice was loaded with a sadness so deep it hurt me to hear it. "I don't know who you are," he said without turning around. "I thought I knew you. I thought we were a team. But it was all a lie." "Not everything was a lie." Vanessa ran toward him, trying to touch him, but Jason pulled away. "I love you. That was never a lie. I just made mistakes. Mistakes I was trying to fix. Fix by destroying my mother." Jason turned around finally, and there were tears in his eyes. "That is not fixing anything, Vanessa. That is being a monster." The word hung in the air, like a final verdict. Monster. Jason had called his own wife a monster, and the devastation on his face showed that he himself couldn't believe those words had come out of his mouth. Vanessa recoiled as if he had hit her physically. Her back hit the living room wall, and she slid slowly until she was sitting on the floor, knees to her chest, sobbing in a way that was almost animalistic. Guttural, desperate. "I am not a monster," she repeated between sobs. "I am not a monster. I am just scared. I am just scared." But no one moved toward her. No one offered her comfort, because what she had done was unforgivable, and everyone in that room knew it. Susan approached me and wrapped me in her arms. It was then that I realized I was shaking too. The whole weight of the night, all the accumulated tension, all the humiliation suffered, began to fall on me like an avalanche. "It's okay," my sister whispered against my hair. "It passed. It's over." But it wasn't over. Not really. Because now we had to deal with the consequences of what Vanessa had destroyed tonight. Nancy approached Jason, touching his shoulder gently. "Are you okay?" she asked with a maternal voice. Jason shook his head slowly. "No, I am not okay. I don't know if I will ever be okay." He turned toward me, and the look in his eyes was pure agony. "Mom, I have no words. What she did to you. What she almost made me believe." His voice broke and he began to cry. My son, that 40-year-old adult man, cried like a child in front of me. I approached him and hugged him with all the strength I had left. "You didn't know," I whispered to him. "You are not responsible for her lies." "But I almost lost you," he sobbed against my shoulder. "I almost believed her lies. I almost allowed her to destroy you." "What kind of son does that?" "A son who loves his wife," I replied with a soft voice. "A son who wants to believe the best of the people he loves. Do not blame yourself for her manipulation." From her position on the floor, Vanessa watched us. Her mascara had run completely, leaving black stains all over her face. Her olive green dress was wrinkled. Her hair, once perfect, now fell in messy strands. She was the very image of total collapse. "I'm sorry," she whispered with a broken voice. "I'm so sorry. I was just desperate." "Desperation does not justify cruelty," Susan said harshly. "Desperation does not give you the right to destroy another person to save yourself." "And what was I supposed to do?" asked Vanessa with a flash of her old defensiveness. "Confess to Jason? Tell him I have been lying for 5 years? That I married him while hiding a huge debt? Would you have forgiven me, Jason? Really?" Jason separated from me slowly. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand and walked until he was in front of Vanessa. He kneeled down to be at her level, looking her directly in the eyes. "We will never know," he said with a calm but cold voice, "because you never gave me the chance to show you who I really am. You never trusted me enough to be honest." "I was afraid," Vanessa began. "Fear is not an excuse for what you did tonight," Jason interrupted her. "You accused my mother of theft. You humiliated her. You made her cry. You treated her with a contempt that she never deserved. And you did it deliberately, calculatedly, to cover your own lies." He stood up, moving away from her. "Fear doesn't do that, Vanessa. Malice does that." Vanessa sobbed louder, covering her face with her hands. "What are we going to do now?" she asked with a choked voice. "What is going to happen to us?" Jason did not answer immediately. He walked toward the window again, looking into the darkness of the night. When he finally spoke, his voice was chillingly calm. "I am going to take you home tonight," he said without turning around. "Tomorrow you are going to pack your things and go live with your mother while we figure this out." "Figure it out?" Vanessa raised her head sharply. "What does that mean?" "Divorce. It means I need time," Jason responded, finally turning to look at her. "Time to process this. Time to decide if I can forgive something like this. Time to talk to lawyers about your debts and see what legal responsibility I have now." "You can't leave me," Vanessa stood up, wobbling. "Jason, please. We can get through this. We can go to therapy. We can." "We can what?" Jason's voice rose slightly. "We can pretend this never happened? We can pretend you didn't try to destroy my mother? We can act like 5 years of lies mean nothing?" He shook his head slowly. "I don't know if there is an us's after this, Vanessa. Honestly, I don't know." Vanessa emitted a sound that was half sob, half scream of desperation. She dropped against the wall again, sliding to the floor like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Nancy looked at her watch discreetly. "I think Susan and I should go," she said softly. This family needs space to process all this. Susan nodded, but before moving, she looked directly at me. You are going to be okay. I nodded, although I wasn't sure it was true. Yes, Jason is here. My sister hugged me tightly. I'll call you early tomorrow, she whispered in my ear. And if you need anything at all, you call me. Understood, understood, I replied with a lump in my throat. Nancy also hugged me before leaving. You are a strong woman, Margaret. Stronger than they thought. The two said goodbye to Jason with silent hugs loaded with meaning and left the house, leaving a void that seemed bigger than their mere physical absence. The silence that remained was heavy, oppressive. Vanessa was still on the floor, crying silently. Jason remained by the window, shoulders tense. And I was standing in the middle of my own living room, feeling strangely disconnected from everything. I need you to get up, said Jason finally, turning toward Vanessa. I need you to go to the bathroom. Wash your face and pull yourself together enough so we can go. I don't want to leave, sobbed Vanessa. I don't want to leave your mother thinking I am a monster. But you are, I said softly, surprising myself with the calmness of my voice. At least tonight. You were. Vanessa looked at me with devastated eyes. Do you hate me? I considered the question carefully. Did I hate her? I had gone through every possible emotion in the last few hours. Fear, humiliation, pain, indignation. But hate? I don't hate you, I finally replied. But I can't forgive you either. At least not now. Maybe never. What you did was unforgivable, Vanessa, and you are going to carry the consequences of that alone. I approached her, looking down at her. You tried to destroy me to save yourself. You turned my home into a battlefield. You used my son as a weapon against me, and all for your own cowardice. I paused, letting the words sink in. So no, I don't hate you. But I don't want to see you in my house again. At least, not until you have faced the consequences of your actions. Until you have learned that people are not disposable pieces in your survival game. Vanessa began to sob again, but this time there was no drama in it, just genuine and deep pain. Jason approached her and extended his hand. Let's go, he said with a tired voice. It is time to go. Vanessa took his hand and stood up with difficulty. Her legs were shaking so much that Jason had to hold her to keep her from falling. They walked toward the door in silence. Before leaving, Jason turned toward me one last time. I love you, Mom, he said with a broken voice, and I am sorry. I am sorry for everything. I love you too, I replied, feeling tears finally beginning to roll down my cheeks. And you have nothing to be sorry for. None of this was your fault. He nodded, unable to speak anymore. Then he left with Vanessa, closing the door softly behind them. And I was left alone in my living room, surrounded by the mess of the interrupted dinner, processing what had just happened. The storm had passed, but the scars would remain forever. The silence that remained after they left was different from the previous silence. It was no longer tense, not threatening. It was empty, as if the house itself was exhausted after witnessing so much emotional destruction. I stood in the middle of the living room for a time I couldn't measure. Seconds, minutes, maybe hours. My body was numb, my mind blank. It was as if all the weight of the night had finally fallen on me and crushed me until I became something immobile. Eventually, my legs began to move by instinct. I walked toward the dining room, where the plates of food had remained untouched, cold, abandoned. The roast I had prepared with so much care now looked like a monument to futility. All that preparation, all that worry, to end in this. I began to gather the plates with mechanical movements. One by one, I took them to the kitchen. The water ran cold over my hands while I scraped the uneaten food into the trash can. The sound of the water was comforting in its simplicity. It was something normal, something mundane, something I could control. While I washed every plate, my mind began to process what happened. Vanessa had entered my house with the intention of destroying me. She had planned to humiliate me, accuse me of theft, turn me into a villain in front of my own family, all to cover her own lies, her own debts, her own disastrous decisions, and she almost succeeded. If it hadn't been for that paper that fell from her purse 3 months ago, if I hadn't seen that bank statement by pure chance, If I hadn't trusted my own memory and my own truth, I would be destroyed now. My son would have believed me capable of theft. My family would have doubted me. My dignity would have been trampled without possibility of recovery. I felt rage beginning to boil in my chest, a clean, justified rage that I had been containing all night. I turned off the faucet with more force than necessary and clung to the edge of the sink, breathing deeply. I had the right to be furious. I had the right to feel this indignation. I had been attacked unjustly, and although the truth had come to light, the wounds were there, deep, bleeding. I looked around my kitchen. Every object, every utensil, every detail reminded me of years of life, of shared moments. Family dinners that were once happy. This kitchen had seen Jason's laughter when he was a child. It had seen my husband preparing coffee in the mornings. It had seen celebrations, birthdays, Christmases. And now it had also seen this destruction, this betrayal. But I wasn't going to let that stain it forever. I wasn't going to allow Vanessa to ruin the memories I had built for decades in this home. The phone rang, startling me. I looked at the kitchen clock. It was almost 10 o'clock at night. I walked toward the landline that hung on the wall and answered with a tired voice. "Margaret." It was Susan. "Are you okay?" I couldn't go to sleep without knowing how you were. Her voice, full of genuine concern, was what finally broke the dam. I began to cry. Not dramatic sobs like Vanessa's, but silent tears that rolled down my cheeks while I tried to keep my voice steady. "I'm fine," I lied. "I'm just processing." "You don't have to lie to me," said Susan softly. "I know what you went through tonight. No one comes out unscathed from something like that." "She was going to destroy me," I whispered. "Susan, if I hadn't remembered that paper, if I hadn't been able to defend myself, she would have won. Jason would have believed I was a thief, but she didn't win." My sister emphasized every word. "She didn't win because you are stronger than she thought, because you kept calm when any other person would have exploded, because you trusted your own truth." "But it hurt," I admitted. "It hurt so much, Susan. Every insult, every accusation, every look of contempt. It hurt." "I know, sister. I know." We talked for almost an hour. Susan let me vent, cry, process out loud everything that had happened. She reminded me of my own strength, my dignity, my worth. She reminded me that I was not responsible for Vanessa's actions, that I didn't have to carry her guilt. She told me that Nancy had cried the whole way back home, that she couldn't believe what she had witnessed, that she was furious for me, hurt for me, indignant on my behalf. "We all love you, Margaret," Susan said, "and we all know who you really are. Vanessa couldn't change that. She couldn't destroy decades of love and respect with one night of lies." Her words were a balm over the open wounds of my heart. When I finally hung up, I felt a little lighter, not completely fine, but at least I could breathe without feeling like I was drowning. I finished cleaning the kitchen, put away the leftovers no one had touched, and made myself a cup of chamomile tea. I sat at the dining table, now clean and tidy, and drank slowly, letting the heat of the liquid comfort me from the inside. While I drank, I thought about all the times I had doubted myself during these 6 months. All the times Vanessa had made a hurtful comment and I had wondered if it was my imagination. All the times I had felt that tension in the air but had dismissed it as old lady paranoia. It hadn't been paranoia. It had been instinct. My body knew something was wrong long before my mind could articulate it. And that was something I would never ignore again. My cell phone vibrated, a text from Jason. "Mom, we made it. Vanessa is in her room at her mom's. I'm going to sleep on the sofa. We'll talk tomorrow. I love you. Forgive me." I responded quickly. "There is nothing to forgive, son. Rest. I love you." Another message arrived almost immediately. "She wants to apologize to you. She says she wants to talk. I told her she has no right to ask you for anything right now." Did I do right? I thought about my answer carefully. "You did right. I am not ready to talk to her. Maybe I never will be. I need time. I understand. Good night, Mom." "Good night, my love." I left the phone on the table and stared at the empty space. The house was silent again, but this time it didn't bother me. It was a peaceful silence. A silence that belonged to me. I got up and walked through every room, turning off lights, checking windows, doing my usual nightly routine. Every action was an act of reclaiming. This was my house, my space, my refuge, and no one, never again, was going to make me feel unsafe in it. In the living room, I stopped in front of the sofa where Vanessa had sat with such arrogance hours before. I ran my hand over the backrest, feeling the fabric under my fingers. This piece of furniture had belonged to my husband. It had years of history, of memories, of lived life, and I wasn't going to let the memory of Vanessa contaminate it. When I got to my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my reflection in the vanity mirror. I looked tired, with deep circles under my eyes, hair messy. But I also saw something else. I saw strength. I saw survival. I saw a woman who had been attacked and had come out victorious. I changed clothes slowly, putting on my most comfortable nightgown. I washed my face, brushed my hair, did all the little actions that constitute normality, and in every action, I found a little more peace. I got into bed and turned off the light. The darkness wrapped around me like a hug. I closed my eyes, waiting for sleep to come quickly. But my mind kept working, replaying moments of the night. Vanessa's face when she entered. Her insults, her accusations, her final collapse. And then I thought about Jason, about how he had to witness the true face of his wife, about how his world had crumbled in a matter of hours, about how now he would have to make difficult decisions about his future. My heart ached for him, but I also knew that this, although painful, was necessary. Lies eventually come to light. Secrets eventually are discovered. And it is better to face the truth, however painful it may be, than to live in an illusion built on deception. The phone vibrated again. Another message, this time from Nancy. Margaret, I know it's late, but I wanted you to know something. What you did tonight was incredible. Not only did you defend yourself, you did it with dignity and grace. You are an example for all of us. Rest well, dear cousin. I smiled in the darkness. I responded. Thank you, Nancy. Your words mean a lot. You rest too. I left the phone on the nightstand and settled between the sheets. My body was exhausted, but my mind was finally beginning to quiet down. I thought about what would come next. The difficult conversations, the decisions Jason would have to make, the possibility that Vanessa and he would divorce, the reconfiguration of our family dynamic. But I also thought about something more important, about the boundaries I would now establish, about the rules I would now impose, about the respect I would now demand. Because I had learned something crucial tonight. I had learned that silence is not weakness, that patience is not submission, that keeping calm does not mean accepting abuse. I had learned that sometimes the greatest strength lies in waiting for the exact moment to reveal the truth, in maintaining composure when others lose theirs, in trusting that justice, eventually, prevails. I settled on my side, hugging my pillow. Tomorrow would be another day, a day to begin to heal, a day to rebuild what Vanessa had tried to destroy, a day to set new boundaries and new rules. But tonight, I simply needed to rest. I closed my eyes and, surprisingly, sleep came faster than I expected. Deep, restorative. The sleep of someone who has fought a battle and come out victorious. The sleep of someone who can finally breathe in peace. I woke up with the light of dawn filtering through the curtains. For a moment, I didn't remember anything. I only felt the warmth of the sheets, the silence of the morning, the peace of a new day. But then everything returned like an avalanche. Vanessa, the accusations, the confrontation, the truth revealed, the collapse. I sat up in bed slowly, feeling every muscle in my body sore as if I had run a marathon. The emotional fatigue had translated into physical exhaustion. But there was something else. There was a sensation of lightness I hadn't experienced in months, as if an invisible weight had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I got up and walked toward the window. Outside, the world continued its normal course. Birds were singing. The sun was shining. Neighbors were taking out the trash and walking to their cars to go to work. Everything so ordinary, so alien to the drama that had consumed my life the night before. I dressed slowly, choosing comfortable clothes, soft fabric pants, a peach-colored blouse, my most comfortable shoes. I brushed my hair, washed my face, looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes still showed tiredness, but there was something different in my gaze. There was determination, there was strength. There was the certainty of someone who has crossed fire and survived. I made coffee in the kitchen, enjoying the aroma filling the space. Toast with jam. Simple, comforting, mine. I sat at the dining table with my breakfast and my steaming cup, and for the first time in a long time, I enjoyed the silence of my own house without feeling anxiety. The phone rang at 9 in the morning. It was Jason. "Good morning, Mom." His voice sounded tired, but also calmer than the night before. "Did you sleep well?" "Surprisingly, yes," I responded honestly. "And you?" "Not much," he admitted. "I spent most of the night thinking, processing, trying to understand how we got to this point." There was a long pause. I could hear his breathing on the other end of the line. "Vanessa left early this morning," he continued. "She called her mother, and she came to pick her up. She packed some things. We didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say." "How are you?" I asked, feeling my mother's heart contract for his pain. "Destroyed," he said simply, but also relieved. "Does that make sense?" "All the sense in the world," I replied. "Sometimes pain and relief come together." "I am going to take a few days off work," he told me. "I need time to think, to decide what to do. I already spoke to a lawyer this morning about the debts. Apparently, since they are debts she incurred before the marriage and deliberately hid from me, I have no legal responsibility for them." "That is good," I said, feeling a small relief. "But even so," his voice broke slightly, "even so, it hurts. 5 years. Mom, 5 years of lies. How did I not see it? How was I so blind?" "You weren't blind," I assured him firmly. "You were trusting. You were loving. You were the husband any woman would deserve to have. She was the one who failed you, not the other way around." I heard him hold back a sob. "I owe you a huge apology for not believing you immediately, for doubting even for a second, for allowing her to humiliate you in your own house. Jason," I said with all the tenderness that could fit in my voice, "you have nothing to apologize for. You were in an impossible position, and when it mattered, when the truth came to light, you were on my side. That is what counts." We talked for almost an hour. I told him how I felt. He told me his plans. We agreed he would come visit me in a few days, when we both had time to process everything better. When I hung up, I felt more at peace. My relationship with my son had not only survived, but somehow had come out stronger from this test. The rest of the morning I spent doing simple tasks. I watered the plants, I changed the sheets on my bed, I cleaned surfaces that were already clean. Every action was a form of meditation, a way to reconnect with my space, with my life. Mid-afternoon, Susan arrived without warning. She brought a bag with fresh sweet bread and a warm smile. "I came to verify it wasn't all a dream," she said as she entered, "that you really stood up to that woman and won." We sat in the living room with coffee and bread, and I told her every detail she had missed after leaving. I told her about the calls, about Jason, about how I felt now. "I am proud of you," said Susan, taking my hand. "I have always been proud of you. But after last night, Margaret, you were a warrior." "I didn't feel like a warrior," I admitted. "I felt terrified." "Warriors feel fear too," my sister replied. "The difference is they act despite the fear. And that was exactly what you did. We spent the afternoon together talking about everything and nothing, about childhood memories, about our parents, about the years we had lived together. It was comforting, healing, exactly what I needed. When Susan left at nightfall, I was alone again. But this time, the solitude didn't weigh on me. It was comforting company, a space to reflect without interruptions. I sat on the living room sofa, the same one where Vanessa had settled with such arrogance the night before. But now that memory had no power over me, it was just that, a memory. And memories couldn't hurt me if I didn't give them that power. I thought about everything I had learned in these last 24 hours. I had learned that my voice mattered, that my truth had value, that defending my dignity wasn't selfishness, it was survival. I had learned that people can wear masks for years before showing their true face. That manipulation can disguise itself as vulnerability, that abusers don't always scream. Sometimes they whisper poison with sweet smiles. But I had also learned something more important. I had learned that I was stronger than I believed, that I could face the storm and come out standing on the other side. That age was not weakness, but experience, wisdom, strategic patience. The phone vibrated. A message from Nancy. "How are you today? Do you need company?" I responded. "I am fine. Better than I expected. Thank you for worrying." She responded immediately. "You are incredible, Margaret. Never forget it." I smiled. No, I wouldn't forget it. As the night fell again over my house, I lit some scented candles. Lavender for calm. I prepared a light dinner just for me. Fresh salad, a little roast chicken I had stored, water with lemon. I sat down to eat in my dining room, at my table, in my space. And for the first time in months, I enjoyed every bite without the weight of anxiety crushing my chest. After dinner, I sat in the living room armchair with a cup of tea and a book I had been trying to read for weeks. The words finally made sense. My mind could finally concentrate. At 10 o'clock at night, Jason called again. "I just wanted to say goodnight," he said with a soft voice, "and tell you I love you, and that I admire your strength more than words can express." "I love you too, son," I replied, feeling tears, this time of gratitude and love, filling my eyes. "And we are going to be okay. Both of us are going to be okay." "Yes," he agreed. "We are going to be okay." After hanging up, I remained seated in the silence of my living room, processing everything lived. Vanessa had tried to destroy me, but in the process, she had shown me exactly who I was. She had forced me to find a strength I didn't know I possessed. She had pushed me to defend my truth with a conviction I had forgotten I had. In a twisted way, she had done me a favor. I got up and walked toward the window. Outside, the stars shone in the night sky. The moon was almost full, gently illuminating the garden. I thought about all the women who, like me, had been attacked unjustly, accused, humiliated, made to feel small by people who needed to elevate their own ego at the expense of others. And I thought about how, sometimes, the greatest revenge is not hate, but survival. It is not destroying the other, but remaining firm in one's own truth. It is not lowering oneself to their level, but rising above their attacks. Vanessa had lost everything last night. Her marriage, her credibility, her carefully constructed mask. She had lost the respect of the few people who knew her. She had lost her place in this family. But I hadn't lost anything. I had gained something much more valuable, the absolute knowledge of my own worth, the certainty that I could face any storm and come out victorious, the deep understanding that my dignity did not depend on the opinion of others, but on my own integrity. I moved away from the window and turned off the living room lights. I walked toward my room with sure steps, without fear, without anxiety. I got into bed and, before turning off the light, I whispered out loud the words I had been saving all my life, waiting for the right moment to pronounce them. I discovered that silence is not weakness. It is the patience of one who saves the truth for the exact moment. It is the calm of one who knows that justice, sooner or later, always arrives. And when it arrives, it doesn't need screams. It doesn't need violence. It only needs the quiet strength of someone who always knew who she was, even when others tried to make her doubt. I turned off the light and closed my eyes. For the first time in 6 months, I slept without nightmares, because finally, after all the storm, I had found my peace, and that peace no one could ever take from me again.